Good afternoon, everybody. So I do your head in today with my foreshortening. It's one of the most difficult things to do in drawing, only because your head just doesn't want to believe that it's there. And I am an avid TV watcher, or tennis watcher, I suppose TV watcher as well. And hi, hello, welcome. And it always intrigues me that on my flat screen, which is pretty much the shape of that photograph there, I can look at a tennis court that looks very, very short. And if I go into here, you can see my cursor. So the distance from the back of the court to the front of the court, which we know, in fact, is quite long, and it's much longer than the width. But here it appears much shorter, that direction from side to side. Now, that is known as foreshortening. And another strange thing that's happening, even though we know that from the bottom of the net to the back, that's half of a court, when we're looking at it from this angle, that foreshortening angle, that distance there looks much shorter than that distance there. So that is all to do with foreshortening, which is irritating, really. But if you know about it, then you can do things about it. And the picture that I actually want to show you is one that I took of a cup and saucer on a long box. And let's go to that one. Okay, so now you can see me, I'm back again, and you can see the picture of that cup and saucer on the long box. And what you're actually looking at there, Caraminthia, no, you're tiny bit late. Not to worry, we've only just started. Glad you picked Ash Barty for the tennis shot. Yeah, isn't she amazing? That wasn't deliberate, though. That was a good, happy accident. Okay, so that box, even though you don't know what the size of that box is, because you haven't seen my particular box, you can see that the cup and saucer that I've taken a bit of a bird's eye view of, you would imagine that you know what a traditional cup and saucer looks like. Good afternoon, Susan Moyer. Nice to see you on board. Has my face frozen? It looks like it might have. All these things that act up. Okay, there I am again. And if it's frozen, it's just unfortunate. As long as you can hear me, it does look like it's frozen. Okay, so I took a bird's eye view to show you how long that box is and how that cup and saucer fit on top. And you can see from this point of view that the cup and its saucer looks reasonably round. It is a circle when you look at it from a bird's eye view, and the box that it's sitting on is long. Jane, what is the answer no to? Your face isn't frozen on my screen. Oh, good. It's only frozen on my screen, so that's okay. Brilliant. So I took a picture just a little while ago of that. However, I also took this picture. And if you look at this picture, so clearly that picture is from a side view. And hello, Jasminka, nice to see you, or proverbially see you. Lovely to have you on board. We've got an international viewership, so that is incredible. I love seeing all of you watching me. I'm a pure show off. Okay, so when we look at the view of that box from a different point of view, we can see that it no longer looks quite as long. And if you didn't know any better, and if you didn't trust me, you'd probably say that the size of the box, let's see if I can demonstrate on there, that the size of the box, you know, somehow I've put it on a different box that's shorter because it looks like the cup is just sitting on that box, but it is in fact exactly the same box. So that's another example of foreshortening. And if we measure from the back of the box to the front, I'm estimating, I'm just doing a little measure there. Yeah, this distance here is about half of the width, and it looks like the cup is sitting right in the middle, which it clearly isn't. Okay, so let me just say that when I look at my own video, which is what you're looking at, everything looks like it's frozen. So hopefully I'm not frozen for you. You will let me know, hopefully, if I am, as I do keep on looking at the contents, at the comments, not the contents. Okay, so back to that box with the cup. And what I'm going to show you is when we looked at the cup from a bird's eye view, it was a circle, right? And some of you may know if you've had lessons with me, but you might know this instinctively. When you look at a cup from the side, you can see the shape at the top of that cup is now an ellipse. It is still a round cup. And technically, what's actually happening, not for you, I haven't frozen for you, Heather, that's great. I assume that's what you're saying. Okay, so when we look at that cup from bird's eye view, it's a circle. When we look at it from the side, it turns into an ellipse. What we're actually looking at is foreshortening. So that is foreshortened that way is much shorter than that. Okay, so I don't, when I teach these cylinders, I don't really talk about it being foreshortening, but it actually is. So it turns from that to that, and that becomes shorter. So foreshortening comes from the fact that anyway we're looking at that cup, right? There's the cup, put it in the middle there. As it turns away from you, it becomes an ellipse, but the direction that it's going in is towards me, or away from me, whatever. So that's 4 from forward, so it's coming forward towards you, and it is shortening, and that's where the word foreshorten comes from. So if you were to draw these items, and this, I know that there is perspective in this picture, and foreshortening and perspective go hand in hand. You can see that you would have to look at where these lines of the box intersect that cup to help you get that foreshortening right. So generally speaking, it would be much easier to draw that mug, because we kind of know how to draw it. Even though that's foreshortening, we don't have to know that it is it's called foreshortening. Make a shorter cup there. If I put an ellipse for my saucer, okay, can see where the saucer intersects with the back of the cup there. I'm not drawing a perfect cup as I do in my demonstrations. This is only a demonstration. But if I want to draw that box, and this is contrary to popular belief, it is easier to draw the thing we know how to draw first, the vertical item, which is this mug, and then we can put the box in relative to where that saucer is. And in fact, if that's the distance on the front of the saucer, which it probably isn't, but the bottom of the box, the top of the box would go about over there, and you could see that it's just a smidge off the edge of the saucer there, and a smidge, technical term smidge, and it's just off there. But have a look at where it intersects the back of the cup. So the corner, so I can see that that's completely wrong. that would be the angle, because I can see the corner of the box through the handle there. So if we go out the other side and we drop a line down, so remember I keep saying put a line visually, put your pencil as a vertical line. If I drop that vertical line from that top corner, right, it cuts across the saucer somewhere, so it's about there. So again, that line is incorrect, so maybe that needs to go much further out, and we end up with a box. Now I haven't measured that depth because we're not talking particularly about perspective now, we're talking about foreshortening, but you should be able to see how that distance, and so that distance to there is so much shorter than we think. And generally speaking, we often draw it, let me move this back, so if I hadn't told you that piece of information, you would probably put this box way up there. So you would put some sort of perspective in, going narrower, but your head would tell you that that's a long, long box. So that is your first bit of information about handling foreshortening, is that you need to compare this distance with something you've already, no, my apologies. I'm putting two ideas together. I will separate them. You need to compare this distance with something else. It could either be that distance there, but a distance that's easy to measure, or that distance, or that distance. But in my instance, I looked at that width there. Now your head knows that that, for the real box, is shorter than that, but it's the foreshortening that we want to look at, and therefore you have to visually hold your pencil up against what it is you're measuring to have a look. Then have a look at where it intersects this, anything that's vertical, and that will help you to put it where it should be. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to show you, and I'll show you the other picture again. Just quickly swap it over to that one, and you can see there that clearly the box is long, and the top of the saucer and the top of the cup is short, and when you look at it from the side, the top of the saucer gets foreshortened, the top of the mug gets foreshortened, and the box itself gets foreshortened. So that applies to anything coming towards you. So what have I got for you next? The next thing I am going to show you is actually going to be on the overhead only. So I'm going to say hello here, and I am going to show you a couple of pictures that I took earlier today while I was walking my animal, and there you can see her in the picture. The council have gone around and they've lopped off lots of branches, and for people who don't live in Australia, that's because our eucalypt trees love to drop their branches when they get a little bit sick, or the branch gets a little bit weak, and in our winter wind and rain sometimes these branches drop. So the council go around in this park particularly, and they chop the trees down. Or no, they don't chop the trees down, they get rid of some of the branches. So that is one of the branches that has been gotten rid of. And what I want you to have a look at is when you look at the side, and in fact from the other side these two branches look like a pair of lips, which I did take a photograph of, but I didn't think to print that one out. Excuse me. So easy enough to draw that. We've got lovely negative shapes in there. So if you remember negative shapes, they are the shapes between things. And here, especially if you haven't seen this before, I hope that's not reflecting too much for you. We can see some lovely negative shapes in here. In fact, that's a whole negative shape. Look at that beautiful negative shape there. And if I color it in, and I take the picture away, that's the shape between those two branches. And that negative shape is going to help us when it comes to foreshortening. So of course, I also took a photograph of that branch from the pointy end, because that is a demonstration of what foreshortening is. And if we look at them both together, let's see if we can get that in the picture. Yep, that's okay. If I take a trusty bit of paper, I don't like, by the way, I don't like measuring with actual rulers. I don't want to get involved with inches and centimeters. I just want to do a bit of a comparison on my photograph. So I'm putting the very point of the piece of paper in the corner there. And let's say that point over there is the longest section of that negative space. Okay? So I've done that. Now, if this were a real branch, well, of course it is a real branch. If you were walking along like I was, and you wanted to know how wide that was, because you were drawing it on the spot, you would use your pencil visually. See if I can do it. Something like that. Okay, so that's not touching the photograph. That's touching the photograph. But visually, you'd put your pencil there and try and get the length. Okay, however, and this is again where your head interferes, because it thinks and it knows that that branch is a long branch. And so when you're drawing this, and you can see that it's lying on the floor, right? It's not sticking up. Okay, it's not the floor, it's lying on the grass. It's lying down like that. It is not sticking up. This one is next to it. You can see there, it's not sticking up like that off the branch. Ah, I'm talking nonsense, off the ground. If I now compare that length of the branch to how long it is here, now we're talking about where it intersected there. So where it intersects in my photograph is about there. Which one is it? It's there. There's the branch going across, which is that branch there, and it's intersecting that stem there. So that's actually the point at which we're intersecting. Look how much shorter it is. So from there to there, it's even less than half. So once again, that's called foreshortening. So how on earth do we draw that without making the branches look like they are sticking up? And the answer to the question is to look at the negative shape. So it was quite easy to draw that negative shape. But if I look at this negative shape, negative shapes do not have a shape that we recognize. So it's much easier to have a look at that negative shape. And in fact, I could have, let's just, here comes my dog to find out what I'm doing. Just adjusting that a little bit. Okay, so I've done two negative shapes. So one for above that branch there and one for there. Now that you can see immediately is much shorter than that, and that is going to help me to draw, because the negative shape isn't anything that we know. We don't know that the negative shape is long and thin, but we do know a branch is long and thin. And what our head wants to do, or your head wants to do, or my head wants to do, is draw a long, thin branch sticking up like that. So automatically I'm drawing these long things. Now obviously I'm deliberately getting it wrong, but it's actually quite easy to get it wrong. I wanted to draw something like that, and that is nowhere near, that is more like our long shape there. That's nowhere near the shortness that's in here. And oh, I've just noticed that beautiful shadow that's on the ground as well, which does mean, if there's a shadow that's cast, it does mean that that branch is lifted off the ground. Right, if I want to draw that by drawing the negative shape, don't forget that you can actually measure negative shape as well. So I can look at this. Let me take my trusty plastic sleeve, and I'll take a different color. I can go, how long is that compared with that? And if I look at that and I make it and I simplify it, it's actually just a short triangle. So if I want to draw this more accurately, I can draw a triangle that looks somewhat like that. So I'm actually starting with the negative shape, and then I can draw my branches around it. Then if I put the top negative shape on, that kind of goes off into the bushes. The top little section there, I've now drawn. Mine is probably too big because I'm still thinking they're long, thin branches. But you can see it's much, much better in proportion than that. So I can also include that negative shape there. So I can come down and I can go, okay, that negative shape does that. And these two fit together like that. So you end up with a branch that actually is the correct foreshortened shape. Getting rather confused here. There's the outside. Sort of swells around, and that cuts across there. Now that's doing my head in a bit, and you do need to step back from these when you've done them, because when you're so close to your work as I am now and as you will be, your head will be screaming at you that it is still wrong. So you have to actually step back before you can see that it's real. I'm actually looking at the screen, which is at the moment my form of stepping back. I haven't drawn this particularly well or to its correct proportion. If I look properly, that branch is going around, which will help. So there are a few things that I needed to observe a bit more carefully for that to look real, but I am showing you about how to do the negative shape. So you can see I've adjusted it a bit there, and so it is looking a little bit more like that branch. Okay, so branches are one thing. I want to show you a couple more instances where we really get affected by negative shape. A couple of other instances where foreshortening is an issue, and you will recognize that these things may have been difficult for you to draw. So basically, yes, we are still looking at measuring things, measuring how big is this compared with that, and also comparing it, where does, let's say in this instance, the back of the road cross the trees. Okay, so lots of times when we are drawing roads going off And again, this is associated with perspective. We often have, let's say that's the size of my picture. We often put the road like that, okay? And we don't look at where in the frame is the road going. And here you'll see it's way down, way past the halfway mark. So we've got about 3/4 there, or 4/5, and then 1/4 there. Actually, it probably is about 3/4 if we do that. If we divide that, that's about half. Yeah, somewhere, you know what I mean. Okay, so that road is much more foreshortened than we think it is. It actually is quite a long road, goes all the way down to that tiny little horizon there. But when you draw it, it's going to be very foreshortened, so not like a mountain. Okay, flowers. Depending on the flowers that you're looking at, obviously, but if you have got a bowl-shaped flower, trying to face my hand in the same direction as the bowl. In fact, if you look at my thumb is foreshortened, but my fingers are long. So the same thing's happened on that beautiful king protea. The inside of those petals is long, and these petals, which are actually physically the same length, are shortened because we are looking down at the top of them. So if you were to draw that first, which is relatively easy to draw, then you place this as you can see it intersecting with your ellipse. Okay, you can look at those negative shapes, that shape there, instead of what your head might want you to draw, because it knows these are long thin, it might draw that for these petals here. Don't make that mistake, okay? So they are short. So if you refer your shapes and your lines to something that was already quite easy to draw, that will help you to draw foreshortening. But particularly the negative shapes, because we don't have an expectation of what negative shapes look like. Okay, so there's a similar sort of thing with this sunflower. These petals here are much shorter than those petals there. Okay, now this gentleman's name is Torsten, and he teaches watercolor at the Gallery Art Studio where I teach drawing, and we're starting our classes again on Monday. Yay! Have a look at the fact that you cannot see his arm. And often when we are drawing people, foreshortening becomes a very big problem. So foreshortening, his arm is coming forward towards us. His hand is then, let's see, yeah. Okay, so you know that my arm is long and relatively thin, but as I turn it towards the camera, look how now short that section is. Okay, it's long, it's the whole image on the camera, and now it's about half the image. See, that's about halfway. So that's what's happening there. There is a tiny, tiny bit there. And your head tells you that arms are long and thin, so it doesn't want to do that. But if you look at where is this shape, where is that hand, relative to his body, it's way up there near his armpits, across his chest. Okay, so you will have to put that in. Or if you look at this negative shape here, you will have to put it in the right place if you associate it with something vertical. This guy came off the internet, and there's a watermark all over it. But I got this to show you quickly is we understand that legs are long and thin. And yes, these legs that we can see upright are quite long and thin from the knee. But from the knee back to where it joins, where his thigh joins his body, that is incredibly short and pretty wide. So we often draw people sitting with a long thigh section and then his leg going down, because we don't want to see that foreshortening. And if he was sitting on a box, you can see that the knee is exactly in the middle of where that box is. So that helps you to draw his foreshortening. And his waist, if we put our pencil a little bit longer, is only a little bit higher than the edge of the box. That means we'll get our foreshortening right. And your brain, your head will scream at you and say, no, it's not right, it's not right. This is a lovely friend of mine. She is a beautiful, beautiful artist, and her name is Michaela. Again, wanted to show you that her forearm, look how short it is in that section. Okay, and in fact her knee is there as well. So her knee, because of the way she's resting, is well above where we would think her knee is going to be. Same thing happens with buildings. Okay, so you can think of these buildings like that long box that I showed you at the beginning. This section here becomes foreshortened. I thought there was one other that I needed to show you. No, can't think. So this is in Christchurch in New Zealand, and again we've got this whole long road shortened down to from the horizon to here. So the whole thing is that short. Foreshortening is difficult because we have an expectation of arms being long and thin, legs being long and thin, chopsticks being long and thin. Look how long and thin that chopstick is, and look what happens when I point it towards you. I'm trying to get it. Okay, it's almost, look how thin it is. I mean, not thin, but look at the, I'm trying to, it's not working. I'm trying to demonstrate. But if I point this chopstick at you right from the end, you can just see the head of it. And as I turn it away from you, it's getting a bit longer. So that's the turned one. But the turned one is not nearly as long as, funny trying to do this live, but you can see what I mean. It's not nearly as long as the full chopstick. Okay, so that's what foreshortening is about. Don't let it fool you. Measure it, see where one line, one end of the foreshortened thing matches something else, and that is going to help you to draw it. I wish you all well. Hope you're keeping safe. Happy drawing, or get drawing. Bye-bye.